My name is Carolyn Marsh. I am 58 years old, and on a Tuesday evening in late October at exactly 12 minutes past 7, I sat at my own kitchen table, the kitchen I had designed in the house I had built, on the land my late husband Raymond and I had paid off together over 31 years, and I watched my daughter-in-law Brianna slide a single sheet of paper across the wood toward me like she was serving me a bill I already owed. "We need you to find somewhere else to stay," she said. Not asked. Said, "Mom's flying in from Phoenix on Friday and she'll need this room permanently." She didn't look uncomfortable. That was the part I couldn't get past in the days that followed. She looked certain, the way people look when they've rehearsed something long enough that it no longer feels like cruelty. Just logistics. I looked at the paper. It was a typed list of nearby senior living communities, complete with phone numbers, estimated monthly costs, and a note at the bottom in Brianna's neat handwriting. "We've already spoken to Meadowview. They have availability." I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I folded the paper once, tucked it into the pocket of my cardigan, and said, "I'll think about it." She smiled. The smile of someone who believes the hard part is already over. What Brianna didn't know, what no one in that house knew, was that the deed to that property was still entirely in my name. It had never been transferred. Not 1 square foot of that land, not 1 brick of that house belonged to anyone but me. I had a meeting with my attorney, Gerald Fitch, scheduled for the following Monday morning, to discuss my estate plan. And I had already, 3 weeks prior, filed a formal notice of occupancy revocation with the county clerk's office, not for myself, but against unauthorized residents who had never signed so much as a rental agreement. Brianna had just handed eviction papers to the woman who owned every inch of the ground she was standing on. This is that story. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this didn't start on that Tuesday in October. This started the way most injustices in a woman's life start, slowly, quietly, and with a smile on the face of the person doing it. My name, before I was Carolyn Marsh, was Carolyn Delaney. I was born and raised in Harrowfield, Virginia, the second of 4 children, and I learned early that the women in my family were expected to work twice as hard for half the credit. My father, God rest him, was a good man who believed in education, but somehow never got around to funding mine the way he funded my brothers. I put myself through nursing school on nights and weekends, working days at a grocery store in Charlottesville, and I graduated debt-free at 26 years old because I refused to ask anyone for anything I could earn myself. I met Raymond Marsh at a church picnic in the summer of 1991. He was 32, a civil engineer with quiet eyes and a laugh that took up the whole room. We married 14 months later. We had our son Daniel in 1994. Then came our daughter Petra in 1997. We saved for 15 years and built our home on 3 acres in Sycamore Ridge outside of Roanoke in 2007. Every nail, every decision, every finish, Raymond and I chose it together. The house was registered solely in my name because Raymond had a business line of credit at the time, and we didn't want the property tangled in any commercial liability. We always meant to update the deed. We never did. Raymond passed away from a heart attack in April of 2019. He was 59 years old. I will not spend time on what grief feels like. You either know or you don't. What I will tell you is that I kept working. I was still a practicing registered nurse at Blue Ridge Regional Medical Center, night shifts, 40 hours a week. The house was paid. My children were grown. I thought I had earned a quiet chapter. Daniel had been dating Brianna Kowalczyk for 2 years when Raymond died. She was 28 at the time, a marketing coordinator with a polished surface and a talent for making herself central to every room she walked into. She was not unkind to me in those first years. She was something more slippery than unkind. She was selective, warm when she wanted something, distant when she didn't. The kind of woman who performs generosity in public and keeps score in private. They married in June of 2021, a lovely ceremony. I contributed $11,000 to the wedding costs because Daniel asked and because I loved my son and wanted them to begin well. I did not ask to be repaid. I did not keep a ledger. That was my first mistake. Not the contribution, the assumption that the gesture would be received as love, rather than as evidence that I was a resource to be managed. They moved into my home 8 months after the wedding. This was my suggestion. Daniel had been laid off from his engineering firm in January of 2022, a casualty of a merger that eliminated his entire department. Brianna was pregnant with their first child, my granddaughter Nora, who arrived in May. I had the space. I had the room. I thought we could help each other. And for a while, we did. Or rather, I helped them, and they received it as their due. Let me give you 3 specific examples so you understand what I mean by that. In the spring of 2022, Brianna decided the kitchen needed updating, not because anything was broken, because she found an Instagram account dedicated to white quartz countertops and shaker cabinets, and she decided the kitchen I had chosen was no longer acceptable. She did not ask me. She presented it to Daniel as a necessary upgrade. Daniel presented it to me as a fait accompli, and before I had fully processed what was happening, a contractor named Pete was standing in my kitchen pulling out the cabinets I had chosen with Raymond. The renovation cost $16,400. Brianna offered to split it. Then, 3 months later, she quietly stopped mentioning her half. I did not press the issue. I filed it away. In September of 2023, Brianna hosted what she called a housewarming reimagined for 40 of her friends. She sent invitations on cardstock that listed the address, my address, with no mention of my name anywhere on the event. Several of her guests asked Daniel who the older woman was who kept offering to refill the appetizer trays. He told them I was his mother. One woman, I heard this directly, said, "Oh, I didn't realize she still lived here." My son said nothing to correct the implication in that sentence. And then there was the matter of my bedroom. In January of 2024, Brianna began referring to the primary suite, my bedroom, the room Raymond and I had shared for 12 years, as the guest suite. She began storing Nora's overflow toys there during the day. She repainted the adjoining bathroom without asking me, a shade she called soft linen, that I would have called beige if I were being diplomatic. When I mentioned I'd preferred the original color, she looked at me with a patience so deliberate it was its own form of contempt and said, "We wanted something more cohesive for the whole wing. The whole wing of my house. I want to be clear about something." I did not raise my voice at any of these moments. I did not write angry texts. I did not call Petra, my daughter, and complain about my daughter-in-law. Though Petra would have listened, I watched, and I filed things away. And I kept working my night shifts. And I thought about Raymond and what he would have said. Raymond would have said, "Carolyn, stop waiting. You already know what needs to happen." Raymond was usually right. The breaking point did not come with thunder. It came on that Tuesday evening in October, 12 minutes past 7, with a typed list of senior living facilities slid across my kitchen table. But let me be precise. The breaking point was not the paper itself. The breaking point was what Brianna said after I told her I'd think about it. I was standing at the kitchen counter, my back to her, filling a glass of water, and she said, to Daniel, who had just walked in from the garage, as if I were not in the room, "She'll come around. They always do when they realize the alternative. They always do." I set the glass down, turned around, looked at my son standing in the doorway of my kitchen in the home I built, watching his wife speak about me as though I were a problem to be routed. And I saw something in his face that I had been refusing to see for 2 years. He wasn't going to stop her. He had, somewhere along the way, decided that his life was easier if he agreed with Brianna, and he had let that decision become his character. I did not cry. I did not ask him why. I said, "Good night," and I went to my room and I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time in the dark. And I made a decision that was absolutely, irreversibly clear. I was not leaving. They were. I called Gerald Fitch at 8 the next morning. Gerald had been my attorney for 19 years. He'd handled Raymond's estate, my will, every legal matter I'd ever had that required someone thorough and unhurried. I told him what had happened, not emotionally, factually. The date of Raymond's death, the date Daniel and Brianna moved in, the absence of any lease or formal agreement, the deed situation. Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Carolyn, do you want to know the good news or the better news?" The good news was that because Daniel and Brianna had never signed a lease, never paid rent, and had no formal rental agreement of any kind, they were classified under Virginia law as licensees, not tenants, which meant the protections that made standard eviction a months-long ordeal did not fully apply in the same way. The better news was that I had been the sole owner of that property since 2007. The deed had never been updated, and there was no legal instrument of any kind that gave either of them any ownership interest whatsoever. I told Gerald about Brianna's paper, the list of senior living communities, the mention of Meadowview. He laughed, not unkindly. The laugh of a man who has seen audacity in many forms and still finds it remarkable. "She handed you the eviction notice before you handed her one," he said. "Gerald told me the process would take approximately 6 to 8 weeks to complete properly. A formal written notice of termination of license would need to be served. If they did not vacate, we could proceed with a formal unlawful detainer filing. He advised me to document everything, to change nothing about my daily behavior, and to tell no one in the family what I was planning." I told him I understood. I went back to my night shifts. I watered my garden. I made Nora scrambled eggs on Saturday mornings because my granddaughter was 2 years old and had no part in any of this, and I loved her without condition. I sat at the dinner table with Daniel and Brianna and answered their questions about my nursing schedule and nodded when Brianna talked about her mother's flight from Phoenix and said nothing at all about what was moving quietly through the county court system with my name on it. Brianna's mother was named Donna Kowalczyk. I had met Donna 3 times. She was 61, twice divorced, and possessed of the particular energy of a woman who had spent decades being supported by other people and had developed a philosophy around it. She believed that family was whoever took care of you best. She had told me this directly at Daniel and Brianna's wedding rehearsal dinner, unprompted, over a glass of Chardonnay. "I always say," Donna had said, "you find your people, and your people take care of you." She had then looked at me in a way that made me feel she was already calculating something. 3 days after Brianna handed me her list, Donna's name began appearing in the house. Brianna mentioned her flight. She mentioned which closet she'd need. She mentioned the conversation she'd had with a painter about refreshing the bedroom that was currently my bedroom. Daniel said nothing. I kept filing things away. In the second week of November, Gerald's office filed the formal notice of license termination with the Roanoke County Circuit Court. A licensed process server delivered a copy to Daniel and Brianna on a Thursday afternoon at 4:17. Gerald's paralegal called me at 4:49 to confirm service. I was at work, night shift. I had 43 more minutes on a 12-hour rotation. I said, "Thank you," and I went back to my patients. Now, I want to pause here for just a moment, because if you've made it this far in this story, I think you already know something about what it feels like to be in this position, to be the woman who built the thing, who held the thing together, who is quiet because she has learned that quiet is how you survive, and then one day someone mistakes your quiet for weakness. If that's you, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, what time it is there, and whether you have ever been handed a piece of paper in your own house by someone who forgot who the house belongs to. I read every single comment, and I want you to know that the next part of this story, what happened when that process server knocked on my front door and Brianna answered it, is worth every minute you've spent watching. The Friday that Donna was supposed to fly in from Phoenix was the same Friday the process server had confirmed delivery. This was not a coincidence I had planned. It was simply the way the calendar fell. But I will not pretend I was unhappy about the timing. I had requested the day off from work. I spent the morning in my garden. The weather in Roanoke in mid-November can be raw and pale, the sky the color of old dishwater, and that morning was exactly that kind of morning. I trimmed back the rosemary along the front path. I brought in the last of the clay pots I wanted to overwinter in the garage. I made myself a pot of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the original table, the one Raymond and I had bought at an estate sale in 2003. The one Brianna had twice suggested we replace with something more transitional. And I drank my coffee and I read 40 pages of a novel I'd been meaning to finish for months. At 11:40 in the morning, Brianna came downstairs. She was dressed for the airport run, hair done, carrying her keys. She stopped when she saw me sitting calmly at the table with my coffee and my book. "I didn't know you were home," she said. "I am," I said. She hesitated. She had been hesitating around me since the notice was served, though she had not mentioned it directly. What she had done instead was call Daniel repeatedly in the 2 days since service. I know this because the walls of my house are not thick, and I heard her say on the night following delivery, "She can't actually do this, can she? It's our home." I heard Daniel say he didn't know. I heard him say he'd call someone. I had not heard anyone call Gerald Fitch. "I'm going to pick up Mom," Brianna said. "Okay," I said. "Her room is ready." I turned a page of my book. "I know you think it is," I said. She left. I finished my chapter. At 2:14 in the afternoon, I heard the car in the driveway. Then the front door. Then Donna's voice, carrying the warm brightness of a woman arriving somewhere she fully expects to be welcome. "Oh, this is just beautiful," Donna was saying as she came through the entry hall. "Brianna, you didn't tell me how beautiful it was. How long have you two been here?" "Almost 3 years," Brianna said. "It's really starting to feel like ours." I was still at the kitchen table. I did not stand up. Donna came around the corner and saw me and stopped. "Oh," she said. "You must be Daniel's mother." "I am," I said. "And you must be Donna. Can I get you some coffee?" She accepted. We sat at the table. Brianna moved around the kitchen with a particular tension in her shoulders that I recognized as the tension of someone waiting for a confrontation and not understanding why it hasn't arrived yet. Daniel came home at 5:47. He kissed his wife, greeted his mother-in-law, then looked at me with the careful expression of a man who has been dreading a conversation for 2 days. "Mom," he said, "can we talk later tonight?" "We can," I said, "but I prefer we do it in the living room, and I prefer Brianna and Donna join us because what I need to say involves everyone in this house." There was a pause. Brianna looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at his hands. "Okay," he said. At 7:30 that evening, the 4 of us sat in my living room. The fire was on because November in Roanoke warrants a fire, and the room had that quality of warmth that makes hard conversations feel almost like they might be survivable. I had a manila folder on the end table beside me. I had not opened it yet. I let Brianna speak first. She had prepared. I could tell. She used phrases like, "what's best for everyone," and a natural transition, and Nora needs stability. She talked about Donna's needs and her own role as a caregiver. She did not once, in 4.5 minutes of speaking, use the word please or the word sorry. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly. I picked up the manila folder. "I want to show you all something," I said. "Daniel, I think you already know most of this, but I want to make sure everyone is working from the same information." I set the deed on the coffee table, the original deed, filed in 2007, listing Carolyn Marie Marsh as sole owner of the property at 14 Sycamore Ridge Road, Roanoke County, Virginia. "This is my house," I said. Not loudly, not triumphantly, the way you state a fact that was always true. Brianna looked at the document. I watched her face process it. "That's," she started. "That is the original deed," I said. "It has never been changed. No one in this house has any ownership interest in this property. Daniel, you know this. We talked about it when your father passed." Daniel's jaw was tight. He nodded once, very slightly. I set the second document on the table. The notice of license termination, already served, stamped, filed with the circuit court. This was delivered to you on Thursday at 4:17 in the afternoon, I said to Brianna. You and Daniel are classified as licensees under Virginia law, not tenants, because you have never signed a lease, never paid rent, and there is no formal agreement of any kind. This notice gives you 30 days to vacate the property. Donna had gone very still in the armchair beside Brianna. She was looking at the document the way a person looks at a road that has just been closed. 30 days, Brianna repeated. Her voice had changed. The certainty was gone. Something was working behind her eyes. 30 days, I confirmed. You're evicting your own son? I looked at my son then. My boy, who I had held every night through every ear infection and every nightmare and every heartbreak of his childhood, who Raymond and I had saved for and hoped for and built toward. He was looking at the floor. I am not evicting my son, I said, still calmly. I am asking his wife and her mother, who has not been here 24 hours, to respect the legal reality of whose home this is. Daniel is welcome to stay. He is always welcome here. But there will need to be a formal conversation about what that looks like going forward, with proper documentation, because it is clear to me that informal arrangements in this family are taken as invitations to take everything. I turned to Donna. I am sorry your travel plans were made without anyone first confirming that you had a legal right to occupy the space. That is not your fault. But I want you to know that before any long-term arrangement for you is discussed, we will be having a very different kind of conversation than the one Brianna led you to expect. Donna opened her mouth, closed it. She was not, I realized, a stupid woman. She was a woman who had just understood that she had been given a map to a house that did not belong to the person who drew it. Brianna stood up. This is insane, she said. Her voice had an edge now, a rising quality that told me she had moved from calculation to genuine distress. We've lived here for 3 years. We have put money into this house. We have a child here. You cannot just... Brianna, I said, and I said her name very quietly, the way you say the name of someone who needs to stop talking before they say something they cannot take back. Sit down. She sat. I do not entirely know why she sat, but she did. The kitchen renovation, I said. The total cost was $16,400. You offered to split it. Your half was $8,200. In the 27 months since that renovation, you have paid me $0 toward that amount. That is a conversation we can have separately, with documentation at a time of your choosing. Silence. The guest suite, I continued. That is my bedroom. It has been my bedroom for 12 years. The paint in the bathroom, the toys in the closet, the term you have chosen for that space, none of those things changed whose bedroom it is. A room does not become someone else's simply because they begin treating it that way. Daniel finally looked up. His eyes were red at the rims. Mom, he said, I didn't. I know, I said. I know what you didn't do, Daniel. We can talk about that too. Not tonight. I closed the folder. I stood up. I put the folder back under my arm. You have 30 days, I said to Brianna. I will not be relocating. I will not be choosing a senior living facility from a list that was typed up without my input or my consent. This is my home, and it will remain my home for as long as I am alive and wish to live in it. If you want to discuss an arrangement going forward that involves you and Daniel living here under a proper lease, with proper terms, I am open to that conversation. I would like Gerald Fitch present for that conversation. I walked to the doorway of the living room, turned back once. Donna, I hope you enjoy Roanoke. It's a beautiful city, but you will not be moving into this house this week. I went upstairs. I ran a bath. I was in bed by 9:47. I will not tell you I felt nothing. That would not be honest. What I felt was complicated and quiet and layered in the way of things that have been a long time coming. There was sadness there, because my son had watched his wife try to remove me from my own home and had not stopped her, and that was a grief of its own kind. There was also something that was not quite relief but was adjacent to it, The feeling of having finally said the true thing in the true place at the right time. I thought about Raymond. I thought about the night we signed the deed at the title company. The way Raymond had squeezed my hand when the notary stamped the paper. His name was not on it because of the business loan, but he had looked at me and said, "This is ours, Caro. We built this." And I had believed him, and I had kept believing it even after he was gone, even when Brianna started calling my kitchen her kitchen, even when she handed me a list of places to go, because some things are true regardless of whether anyone is behaving as though they are. In the weeks that followed, the house underwent a significant shift. Donna flew back to Phoenix 4 days after she arrived. I know she and Brianna had long phone calls during those 4 days. I know because I am a woman who lives in her own home and hears what happens in it. I do not know exactly what Donna said during those calls, but I know that when she left, she hugged Brianna on the front porch and said, "You figure it out, baby." And the way she said it had the sound of someone withdrawing from a situation they had misjudged. Daniel came to me on the Saturday of that same week. He knocked on my bedroom door at 9 in the morning, which was a courtesy he had not extended in some time. I told him to come in. He sat in the chair by the window, the one Raymond used to sit in to read, and for a while he just looked at his hands. "I should have said something," he said. When she gave you that paper, I was right there. I should have said something." "Yes," I said, "you should have." I don't know when I stopped. He stopped, started again. I think I just kept letting things go because it was easier, and I didn't realize how far it had gone until I saw you sitting at that living room table with the deed, and I thought, she's been protecting this whole time and I've been absent, I said. He nodded. It was a painful nod, the kind that costs something. "Brianna isn't a bad person," I said, because I believed it, and because I needed him to understand that what I had done was not about villainy. She is a person who was allowed to want more than was hers, and nobody stopped her until I did. That is a failure of clarity, not a failure of character. But clarity is my responsibility in my own home, and I let it go too long. Daniel stayed for 2 hours that morning. We had coffee. We talked about Raymond. We talked about Nora, who was too young to understand any of this, but who would grow up in whatever environment we created around her. We talked about what a proper arrangement might look like if he and Brianna chose to stay, and I told him it would involve a lease at below market rent, household contribution guidelines, and a clear understanding that the decisions about this property are mine and mine alone. He said he thought Brianna would agree to that. I said I hoped she would. I said I was not trying to punish anyone. I was trying to live in my own home in peace. Gerald Fitch and I met the following Monday with Daniel and Brianna. Brianna was quiet in a way that was different from her usual practiced composure. This was the quiet of recalibration. She had spent 3 years operating in a world where the rules were whatever she said they were, and she had just discovered the world had rules she hadn't authored, and they were older and more binding than anything she had planned. They signed the lease, below market rent, as I had said, household contribution guidelines in writing. A clause that any modifications to the property require written consent from me in advance. Gerald had the document notarized. Brianna signed where she was told to sign. She did not meet my eyes during the signing, but she did not argue either. And Donna's room? There is no Donna's room. There is no Donna's room. There is my bedroom, the one I chose in 2007, the one Raymond and I slept in for 12 years, the one I have reclaimed in full. The soft linen paint in the bathroom has been repainted a color I chose myself. A deep, quiet sage, the color of old rosemary, the color of something that has survived a long winter and is still standing. I want to talk to you directly now, if you will allow me that moment. If you are watching this and you are the woman in that house who has been slowly, politely, methodically erased, not dramatically, not cruelly, but carefully, I want you to know something. The thing that made Brianna believe she could hand me that list was not her boldness. It was my silence. My years of not pressing for my half of the renovation cost. My years of not asking Daniel why he said nothing when I was talked about as though I weren't in the room. My years of absorbing the steady replacement of my preferences with someone else's. My silence was not kindness. It was permission, given in small amounts, until it amounted to an open door. I do not say this to assign blame to myself. I say it because I think some of you know exactly what I mean. You have been quietly reasonable for so long that people have mistaken your reasonableness for acquiescence. They have mistaken your calm for defeat. They have begun treating your home like a place they have inherited rather than a place they were invited into. The deed was always in my name. That's the thing. The power was always there. I simply needed to stop apologizing for it. The loudest comebacks are built in silence. That is not a metaphor. I literally spent 8 weeks going about my daily life, tending my garden, working my night shifts, reading my book at my kitchen table, while the legal apparatus of what I had set in motion moved forward without anyone in that house knowing what was coming. I did not announce it. I did not threaten. I simply acted, and I let the facts present themselves at the time of my choosing. If someone in your life has handed you a list of places to go, I want you to ask yourself one question before you do anything else. And the question is not whether you can fight it, or whether you deserve better, or whether the other person was really as wrong as you think they were. The question is this: whose name is on the deed of your own life? Because the answer, no matter how long you have allowed other people to act as though otherwise, is yours. It has always been yours. And the beautiful, patient, devastating thing about a truth is that it does not become less true because someone has decided to ignore it. It waits. It files its paperwork. It sits at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a novel. And when the time comes, it does not shout. It simply unfolds a document on the coffee table and lets the room go quiet. My name is Carolyn Marsh. I am 58 years old, and I am home. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been made to feel like a guest in your own life, your own home, your own family, your own history, by someone who never built a single thing they now claim? Leave it in the comments. I read every one. Before I go, I need to take a moment to speak directly to each of you who has stayed until the end of this story. You could have clicked away at any point. You didn't. That means something to me. This channel exists because of the women who watch it. Women who have sat quietly through things no one witnessed, who have swallowed words that deserved to be spoken, who have been patient long past the point where patience was fair. Every story we tell here is for you, not for the drama of it, for the recognition. The moment you watch someone's story and think, I know exactly what that felt like, and you feel slightly less alone in having felt it, that is why we are here. That is the only reason. Thank you for watching, for commenting, for sharing these stories with the women in your life who need to hear them. If this story reached you, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. The comeback stories are just getting started and we are not done yet.